Good afternoon, all. I hope everyone is having a wonderful and blessed Friday. Um, After hearing the update on R. Kelly today, um, I just knew it. I was prepared for it, but we're going to continue to keep fighting and we're going to continue to keep praying and not worry. Okay? We're going to continue to pray and not worry. I already see it for what it is. As long as those liberal judges got power, they're going to continue to deny R. Kelly his rights and his freedom. Um, it's just what it is, y'all. This is not about those women. This is about political power with those judges. They're sending a statement. Um, it's important to know your American history as a black American and understand some of the things that I keep telling you, there's two different types of white people in America. And this war been going on since America um, became America, you know, from the time we became the United States of America, just put it that way. And um, the South and the North, and some people that from the South at the time, of that time, during that time or whatever, it was controlled by liberals. I mean, by slaves, and of course, KKK members. Not every place in the United States was a slave state. There's some places that weren't a slave state in the United States of America. If you do your research and you do your history, you seek, you shall find. Accident shall be open to you. Not every state in the United States was a slave state. Um, and you just got to find that in your history as you search your history, black history. When you search through black history, you will find it. History in general, because black history is history in America. Okay, the foundational black America is now giving birth to their history now. It's been going on. They've been fighting for reparations, but not every state in America had slaves. That's why it's so important to know your history, your family lineage, where your family was, or whatever. My family, of course, was in South Carolina. I can look back to my family back in South Carolina. And I believe South Carolina was a slave state. It was a slave state. So, my family probably, there is some reparations in my family because we were owned by slaves. They even have the slave port still there in South Carolina. So this man, what's his name, asked for reparations in Chicago, and there was never any slaves in Chicago. That's the funny thing, Chicago. See, do your history, do your American history, and you're gonna find out. Anyway, and then it was the Confederate, and then it was the other that was the Republic or the Unions or whatever. And then it was those who didn't believe in having slaves, and that's one of the states that they did not believe in having slaves is Chicago. Chicago was not a slave state. Neither was New York, I don't think, and neither was. I'm not sure about everything else, but I just know New York and Chicago was never slave state. But most states that you find to be blue, because I'm in Delaware, the first state was a slave state. This state here is a slave state, and these people still think with a slave mentality. And they're very liberals, a lot of liberals in Delaware. Of course, this is Biden's state. It was a slave state. So I'm just saying. That's why you don't hear too much noise and craziness going on like you hear in the cities that are blue in, well, we have the noise. The noise is going on in Philadelphia. In Philly was not. Pennsylvania wasn't a slave state. Pennsylvania was always a free state, okay? So when you do your history, you're going to find out what states were free and what states was owned by KKK. Okay, KKK. It's a KKK state, the plantation. And I'm sure some are scattered around here too. You know, they move around. You know, they move around and they try to fit in where they can get in, you know, to do practice their white supremacy or whatever. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. There's racism, but most Republicans, they know who people belong to them. Most Republicans, they don't really practice any of those type of things because Republicans, they just not, that's not their way of thinking. They conservative, you know, they love God first and foremost. You know, they don't go with this liberal stuff as far as too far away from the scriptures. They live mostly by the scriptures, but they also believe in you pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. And every man, you know, like every man can basically live well on the land. They don't believe in all of that. If you look at the way the Republicans act, you can see it in their nature, in the way they carry themselves. They're very conservative, so that's who they are. Okay, the liberals are messy. They the ones that want to feed you all of this craziness. They lunatics and they the racists. But anyway, I got a story here to tell. This is a Black history story. This is a black man by the name of Charles Caldwell that was from the state of Michigan. What state was he in? Kentucky, I think it was Kentucky. Well, as the video plays, we're gonna find that out. And what happened was he was one of the first black men that ever was found not guilty for killing a white man. I just found this story very interesting, and they said this is one of the hidden stories that nobody, you know, like a lot of people don't teach about, America don't teach about. But his story is out there. So, like I said, you seek, you shall find, ask, and it shall be given. But this is a very interesting story. So, I thought I would share it today on my platform just to not, I'm not promoting violence, okay? This is not to promote any kind of racial violence or anything of that nature, just sharing some history. Okay, just share. I wanted to share it yesterday, but I was so up in my thing with my R. Kelly thing. But now it's gonna calm down. But thank God that his attorneys and everything, they're gonna still try to fight for him. They're gonna still try to get something done. Okay, so we just gotta be patient. Let's just continue to pray for R. Kelly. Prayfully, R. Kelly will get pardoned or whatever. But I don't, you know, those judges and everything, by what they already said, how many times they don't not want to allow this man released and not giving this man an opportunity to get, you know, surgery, whatever his health condition. I'm more worried about R. Kelly's health right now, and his. I'm worried about both his life, those threats on his life, and I'm worried about his health. But prayer, if we continue to pray and everything for protection over him, God hear our sincere prayers and God will answer them. So hopefully, you know, things will get done speed and things will get done ahead. You know what I'm saying? But we just got to pray and stay strong in prayer and steadfast in prayer. So here I'm going to share this story with y'all. So here we go.
Bent the chains of slavery into weapons of justice, and the nightmare he became for every racist in Mississippi.
So y'all can hear this beginning.
It's Mississippi, 1875.
It was Mississippi, y'all.
But the South still drips with hatred. The fields are quiet, but the saloons are loud, filled with bitter white men, former Confederates and Klansmen, clinging to the last scraps of their stolen power. They drink, spit, and swap stories about the good old days when black men knew their place, when a slave couldn't vote, when nobody like him would dare walk through the front door. A a black senator, a former slave, a man who had terrified white supremacists just by standing tall. They had tried to erase him that night, ambushed in a basement by men who couldn't beat him in life. But even with a bullet in his skull, he refused to fall like a coward. "Remember, when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man. Never say you killed a coward," said Caldwell. This is the story of the blacksmith turned senator who bent the chains of slavery into weapons of justice, and the nightmare he became for every racist in Mississippi. Because when Charles Caldwell spoke, everybody listened. And when white America tried to silence him, they learned one brutal lesson. You can kill a man, but you can never kill a movement. But how exactly did Charles Caldwell come to power? And what exactly did he do that was so hated by those old Southern racists? Keep watching to find out. To understand Charles Caldwell, you have to understand where he came from. And we need to go back to Mississippi, the beating heart of America's racial nightmare. Nobody wanted to be a slave, but no slave wanted to be in Mississippi. The phrase "sold down the river" struck terror in the hearts of slaves in Virginia and North Carolina because they knew what awaited them: brutal labor under the Mississippi sun, cotton and sugar plantations in conditions designed to break both body and spirit. The rice plantations were especially brutal. Slaves forced to stand in water for hours while malaria ran rampant, with child mortality rates reaching a staggering 90% on some plantations. Charles Caldwell was born into this living hell in 1831. And while most slaves were worked to death in the cotton fields, Caldwell found himself in a different kind of prison, a blacksmith shop in Clinton, just outside Jackson. Here's the thing about blacksmiths in the South, though. It was probably the best job a slave could get. Every plantation, every slave master, every overseer depended on them. Without blacksmiths, the whole machine of slavery would have collapsed. And Caldwell's craftsmanship set him apart. Even in chains, he commanded respect within his community. His work was so perfect, so precise, that even those who claimed to own him couldn't deny his mastery. As a skilled blacksmith, he enjoyed more autonomy than other plantation slaves, though he remained firmly in chains. But in that forge in Clinton, Mississippi, Caldwell was laying the foundation for a future none of his masters could ever imagine. That future arrived sooner than anyone expected. By 1865, the Civil War had shattered the chains of slavery, and for a brief moment, a new dawn seemed possible. They called Reconstruction. And in Mississippi, where black people outnumbered whites, Reconstruction was supposed to create a society where blacks lived on equal footing with white folk. And for a brief few years, this was starting to become true. In 1867, Mississippi started letting freed black men vote, and Caldwell's hard work finally paid off. His reputation in Clinton had earned him significant respect within the community. That respect turned into political power. By 1868, this former slave, a man who once couldn't legally read or write, was chosen as one of 16 black Republican delegates to Mississippi's Constitutional Convention. And Caldwell wasn't there to play nice. As a radical Republican, he fought for things that would make a white supremacist blood boil: the right for black men to vote, public education for all, and complete political equality. But you see, this wasn't just about one man changing his position. This was about creating real power within the black community. For the first time, black voices were in the room where decisions were being made. Black hands were drafting laws. Black minds were shaping Mississippi's future. The white power structure watched in horror as men like Caldwell, men they once claimed to own, stepped into positions of authority. And of course, Caldwell, being Caldwell, did more than just participate. He excelled. See, Caldwell's experience at the forge had taught him something crucial: how to shape raw material into something powerful. Only now, instead of shaping iron, he was helping forge a new Mississippi. The former masters were about to learn that they'd created their own worst nightmare: a black leader who knew their system inside and out, who understood their weaknesses and who wasn't afraid to strike while the iron was hot. In 1870, Caldwell struck his first blow. The
You
Mississippi.
see, back then there were slaves that actually were slaves, but they were free men because they knew the strategy. They knew how to strategize. And you don't know where you can't always live in fear of certain type of people. You just can't live in fear of them because fear is going to attract the energy of fear. So we got to stay strong, we got to stay focused, and we also got to stay with good energy. That's how you got to fight against the evils that come against you in this world. And this is what Charles Caldwell was doing. He did what was right. He worked as a blacksmith. He gave quality work. He gave excellent work. And that's how he was able to win his enemies to be his friends, those enemies that did not look like him. You see, because like I said, not everybody, just because they're white, hate black people or associated with KKK. And we got to get past that mentality to order for us to excel in life and to do greater things for our people. And those people that want to keep pushing that victim mentality to you, those are the people that's holding us back. They only want to make everything racial when it comes to something that comes against us. Maybe because some of the things that come against us is because we got too many of those kind of people who continue to push that agenda of racism. Just because you see some white people that dress well, look well, and doing well, doesn't necessarily mean that those are the white people that want to keep you in bondage. And those white people that's fighting against this injustice in America right now, and the injustice is that these people brought in these criminals to come into the United States of America because they wanted to replace black people. Have them work for less money, pay them less money, and keep us away from jobs. That's what they're doing. That was their strategy during this whole election when they allowed all these illegals to come across our borders and kept the open border. So let's listen to what's going on here in this video.
State Senate. For 5 straight years, he fought for things that kept slave owners awake at night: the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. The 14th Amendment would make every black person born in America a citizen with all the rights that came with it. The 15th Amendment would make sure no state could ever deny a man the right to vote based on race. But here's the thing about being a black senator in Mississippi, pushing for revolutionary changes like these. The more power you gained, the bigger target you became. And some people couldn't stand seeing a former slave wielding this kind of influence. The white power structure didn't wait long to strike back. Right after the Constitutional Convention, a highly respected white judge's son decided to teach Caldwell a lesson. Drew his gun, took his shot. But those hands that worked steel for decades weren't just for show. In one fluid motion, Caldwell dodged the bullet and fired back. The judge's son was dead before he hit the ground. Another fool who thought he could break a man that slavery couldn't keep down. This was Mississippi in the 1870s. A black man terminating a white judge's son meant certain death. When the trial was set with an all-white jury, everyone knew how this story was supposed to end, with Caldwell swinging from a rope. But none of that happened. That all-white jury looked at the evidence and looked at Caldwell. And they all did something that had never done before in Mississippi history. They found the black man not guilty, and Caldwell walked free. Caldwell wasn't just any senator anymore. He was also a crack shot, a fearless man. and racists everywhere began to fear him. Even his enemies had to admit, wherever this man went, whether that was inside a forge or in the halls of the Senate, he commanded respect. But if there's one thing we learn about history, it's that respect comes at a steep price. And Caldwell's enemies were just getting started. By the way, if you like the sort of content we share on this channel, please leave a like and click that subscribe button. We want to spread the untold stories of these black heroes far and wide. Charles Caldwell wasn't interested in just being feared. He wanted something even more dangerous: change. And so, even while he still felt the pain of slavery and had just recently survived an attempt on his life, Caldwell still believed in something radical: that blacks and whites could actually share political space. He helped organize a Republican rally on September 4th, 1875, in Moss Hill, Clinton, Mississippi. Then, he did something unthinkable. He invited Democrats, the party of slave owners and racists, to come speak. 2,000 black citizens showed up that day, bringing their families for what was supposed to be a peaceful gathering of picnicking and politics. The organizers banned weapons and alcohol. They were trying to do this the right way, but among the crowd were 18 armed white liners drunk ex-Confederate soldiers who made up the Democratic Party's unofficial attack squad. These weren't politicians. These were the attack dogs of white supremacy. For 1 hour, everything seemed possible. The Democratic speaker, Amos R. Johnston, gave his speech. The black crowd listened respectfully. But the moment a Republican speaker took the stage, those 18 drunk white liners started heckling. When Republican newspaper editor Captain H.T. Fisher took the stage, the white liners started calling him a liar, making moves to disrupt the rally. Caldwell and other organizers tried stepping in, pleading for calm. Then it happened. Shots rained down on them, and immediately, 3 whites and 5 blacks died in the chaos, including 2 children. The crowd scattered in panic, running in every direction to escape the random spray of bullets. But this was just the beginning. A lie spread through the white community. Blacks were planning to attack Clinton. It was all the excuse they needed. Over the next 2 days, hundreds of armed white liners poured into town by train. Their ranks swelled by the hour. And then, the hunt began. No black man would be allowed to leave alive. More than 500 black men fled to Jackson, desperately seeking protection from the U.S. Army. Others disappeared into the surrounding swamps and woods. But for those who couldn't escape, the white liners moved unopposed through Hinds County, dragging black citizens from their homes, shooting them on the spot. Any house they found empty, they looted. They hunted black men through the streets like shooting birds. Sarah Dickey, a white educator who witnessed the carnage, wrote desperately to President Grant, "Whoever says to you that our troubles in Mississippi are slight sanctions their slaughter." By the time the bloodbath ended, somewhere between 35 and 50 black people perished. Most of their names would never be recorded, their bodies never found. But Caldwell wasn't about to watch his people get slaughtered. He organized a militia and led them through Clinton, protecting what was left of the black community. But to the white power structure, a black man with a gun protecting black citizens, that was a death sentence. They'd been looking for an excuse to get rid of Charles Caldwell. Now they had one. The September Massacre changed everything. It was a sign that the white power structure wanted to destroy whatever Caldwell was building. Mississippi's Republican Governor Ames wrote to President Grant begging for federal troops, but Grant's response was underwhelming. He said he was weary of these annual autumnal outbreaks in the South. On October 13th, backed into a corner, Ames sat down with Democratic leaders for a peace conference. The deal was simple. He'd disband the black militia Caldwell organized if the white liners promised to stop the violence. Ames eventually folded. But to trust the promises of white men during those times was about as solid as writing a contract on toilet paper. The violence against blacks never stopped, and black people were again left on their own. By November 2nd, the terror campaign had served its purpose. Without any military protection, black voters faced a choice: stay home or die. The Democrats seized control of the state legislature. Even Caldwell, despite his reputation for fearlessness, lost his Senate seat. But Caldwell wasn't built to stay quiet. On Election Day, when other Republicans were backing down from Democratic threats, Caldwell had stood his ground. "No, we are going to stay right here. You must just come right along and keep your mouth shut. I don't care what they say to you. Don't you say a word." That's the kind of defiance that defined Caldwell. Even after losing power, he stayed in Clinton, continued protecting his community, refusing to bow to white intimidation. And that's what drove him to act on December 25th, 1875, when he heard his nephew, David Washington, had been threatened and harassed by local white men. Even after everything, Caldwell was still trying to protect his own. That Christmas Day, Caldwell went into town to find out what was happening with his nephew. At some point, he ran into Buck Cabell. The two had known each other for years. Like many white men in Clinton, Cabell had watched Caldwell rise, from blacksmith to senator, from enslaved man to leader. They weren't friends, not really. But in the tangled aftermath of the massacre, old familiarity could be mistaken for trust. Cabell kept insisting they share a Christmas drink to celebrate the holiday. Caldwell didn't want to go. He wanted to get home to his wife, to celebrate Christmas with family. But Cabell was relentless, and so the two went down to the basement of Chilton's store. As they touched their glasses in a toast, it happened. The window behind Caldwell exploded with gunfire. The first shot hit him in the head. But Charles Caldwell, even with a bullet in his skull, wasn't going to die like a dog. Wounded but conscious, he made one last request: to die like a man, out in the open. They carried him into the street. While Caldwell was bleeding to death, he straightened up, fixed his blood-stained clothes, looked his killers dead in the eye, and spoke words that would echo through history. "Remember, when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man. Never say you killed a coward. I want you to remember it when I am gone." Then 40 shots rang out. The bravest man in Mississippi fell in a hail of bullets. Not long after, they went looking for more. This time it was Caldwell's younger brother, Samuel. Samuel wasn't a senator or a politician. He didn't carry a gun. He wasn't making speeches or organizing rallies. He was just Charles Caldwell's brother. And for the men who had already eliminated one Caldwell that night, that was all they needed to know. They found Samuel and terminated him as well. Punishment by association. That night, the intent turned to desecration. The mob stormed Caldwell's home, where his wife had laid out the bodies of both brothers for burial. She tried to give them a proper goodbye, but the mob wasn't about to have that. Instead, they flipped the coffins and spat on their faces. They cursed their names and mocked them in death, just as they had tried to erase them in life. Because that's how cowards operate. They don't show up when the fight is fair. They wait until you're alone, until you're gone, and then they come for the memory, thinking if they ruin what's left, they can erase what mattered. So what happened to the cowards who ambushed Caldwell in that cellar? Predictably, nothing. His killers, even though they were known figures within the white community, walked away free. Caldwell's death marked the brutal, violent end of Reconstruction's promise in Mississippi and across the South. Getting rid of a man like Caldwell, a powerful, elected black leader, sent a chillingly clear message. Black political power would not be tolerated. It was the beginning of the rollback, the start of Jim Crow's shadow creeping across the land, erasing the gains that men like Caldwell worked so hard towards. But even if they killed the man, they couldn't kill the idea. Today, there's no statue of Charles Caldwell towering over the Mississippi Capitol, no national holiday, no required school curriculum. But if you walk to the corner of Leek and Jefferson Streets in Clinton, the spot where he perished, you'll find a small historical marker. It stands not just to mark the place where he died, but to remind those who pass by that someone once stood here, unafraid, unbought, and unwilling to be silent. If you're not ready to let the black man's story end here, there's more. There was another brave soul who stood up when no one else would. Another man who terrified the white supremacists so badly, they called in the help of the FBI. I would like to think in another universe, Charles Caldwell was friends with this man. Click here to watch the story of Robert F. Williams, the black man who terrified white America.
Now there you go. Those who want to come against you because of the color of your skin, fear not your enemies, fret not yourself because of evildoers, because in your heart it's just got to be right too. You can't bring a person to be your friend when you're a fearful person. You have to be a kind person, a loving person. Because when you live like that in fear, you're going to attract that energy. Spirit knows spirit. So, with that being said, God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And if God's willing, I'll be back with you all again soon. Peace.